A teacher was fired. A vice principal was placed under formal review. 3 victims finally got their cases reopened. And a 16-year-old girl who had done nothing wrong walked away with a full national scholarship. But none of that happened because the system worked. It happened because one man made the mistake of thinking a mother would stay quiet, and he was wrong about that in the most public way possible. This is how it ended. Now let me tell you how it started. My daughter Chloe does not fail. That is not arrogance, that is 4 years of documented fact. Perfect attendance, straight A's across every AP course she took, thousands of hours of self-directed study. She had 1 exam left between her and the National Science Foundation Scholarship, 50 awards given nationwide each year, full tuition, no strings. 1 exam. She walked in prepared and she walked out knowing she had nailed it. So when she came through the front door last Tuesday holding that paper with a red F circled at the top, my first reaction was not anger. It was confusion. I took the exam from her hands and went through every single problem. Her answers were correct. All of them. The methodology was clean, the calculations matched the textbook exactly, and there was not one error I could find anywhere on those pages. Chloe was not crying because she had failed. She was crying because she knew she had not, and she also knew, even if she could not say it out loud yet, that this had nothing to do with physics. I set the exam down, picked up my keys, and told her I was going to fix it. What I did not tell her was that I already knew exactly why this had happened, and that I had been dreading this moment for 5 weeks. It started at the school's annual charity auction. I was volunteering at the check-in table when Mr. Whitmore walked up. He taught AP Physics, mid-40s, recently divorced, and he was not there to donate. He stood at my table and said nothing, just watched me work. I asked if everything was okay. He reached into his jacket and set a small velvet box on the table in front of me without a word. I opened it. Inside was a silver necklace with a diamond pendant, and tucked into the lid was a photograph, digitally edited, showing the 2 of us holding hands. A photo he had made. Of us. Holding hands. I told him I could not accept it. He said he knew I was single and that he could be good for me. I pushed the box back across the table as quietly as I could, because we were surrounded by parents and staff and I did not want to make a scene. I told him directly, I was not interested, and this was not appropriate. That was when he reached out and wrapped his hand around my wrist. Not violently, but deliberately, like a man who was used to waiting people out. He said, "Just think about it. 1 dinner." I pulled my arm back and said no. His expression changed in a way I will not forget. Everything warm in his face disappeared, and what replaced it was flat and cold and certain. He said, "You'll regret that," and walked away. I stood at that table for the rest of the evening telling myself I had misread it. I had not misread anything. 2 weeks later, Chloe came home with AC on a lab report. She had never received AC in her life. I looked at the paper and could not find a single error. I told myself it was a grading inconsistency, that it would correct itself. 3 days after that, she got a D on a quiz. Then the F on the final. Each one arrived like a step down a staircase he had already built, and I knew exactly where it led. He was not grading my daughter. He was sending me a message, and he was using her future to deliver it. I went to the school the next morning and asked to speak with him directly. I sat across from him and told him calmly that Chloe's answers were correct and that her grades did not reflect her work. He leaned back in his chair, looked at me for a long moment, and said, "Maybe we could discuss Chloe's performance over dinner." I did not raise my voice. I did not give him the reaction he was looking for. I stood up, walked out of his classroom, and went straight to the main office. I filed a formal complaint with the vice principal that same day, laid out the pattern, explained the auction, described what he had said just now in his classroom. The vice principal nodded, took notes, and told me they would look into it. I went home and waited. A week passed. Then another. Nothing changed. Chloe's grade stayed. The scholarship deadline moved closer. And Mr. Whitmore continued teaching as if I had never said a word, because as far as the school was concerned, I had not said anything worth acting on. That was the moment I understood that the door I was supposed to use had been quietly closed in my face, and I was going to have to find another way through. I want to be honest about what I decided to do next, because it was not impulsive and it was not emotional. I sat at my kitchen table that night and thought through every option I had left. I had no recording. I had no witness to the auction. I had a pattern of grades that any administrator could explain away as academic performance, and I had a vice principal who had already chosen to do nothing. What I needed was for Mr. Whitmore to say it again, clearly, on record, in a context where he could not walk it back. And I knew exactly how to make that happen, because he had already told me what he wanted. So the next afternoon, I drove to the school, sat in the parking lot, and made one phone call before I went inside. I called Principal Hernandez directly, bypassed the vice principal entirely, and told her everything from the beginning. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she asked me one question: "Can you get him to say it again?" I told her I already had a plan. She told me to send her the recording the moment I had it, and that she would handle the rest. Then I fixed my hair, reapplied my lipstick, changed into the heels I kept in my bag, and walked into his classroom. He looked up when I came in. I smiled and said his name softly. I walked over and sat on the edge of his desk instead of the chair across from it, and I watched his face go red in real time. I told him I had been thinking about what he said, that maybe I had been too harsh, that I thought he might actually be good for me. I reached over and straightened his tie, letting my hand rest there a moment longer than necessary. He could not form a complete sentence. His breathing changed. He said, I would be good for you," like a man reciting something he had rehearsed in his head 100 times. I asked what he was doing that evening. I said maybe we could finally have that dinner. He had his phone out before I finished the sentence. He booked a table at Morello's for 7:30, told me I could order anything I wanted, said he would pay for everything. I smiled one last time, told him I would be there, and walked out. My phone had been recording in my jacket pocket the entire time. I sent the audio file to Principal Hernandez before I reached my car. I told Chloe when I got home. She laughed so hard she had to sit down. My phone buzzed all afternoon. At 6:50, Mr. Whitmore texted to say he was already at the restaurant. At 7:10, he texted again to say he had a table in the back and was ordering wine. At 7:20, he sent a third message saying he had ordered my favorite, which I still do not know how he found out, and that the brisket was coming. I read each message, set my phone face down, and finished getting ready. I arrived at 7:28. I could see him through the window before I walked in, sitting at a corner table with candles and 2 full glasses of wine, adjusting his tie. His face lit up the moment he saw me come through the door. Then his eyes moved to the woman walking in beside me, and every bit of that light went out at once. Principal Hernandez sat down at the table without being invited. Mr. Whitmore looked between us and said, "What is this?" I sat down across from him and told him I had informed Principal Hernandez about what he had been doing to Chloe. He said he had no idea what I was talking about. I said it clearly, loudly enough for the surrounding tables to hear. "You have been failing my daughter because I rejected you." His face went pale. He said that was insane, that he would never. I took out my phone and pressed play. His own voice came out of the speaker and filled the space between us. "Maybe we could discuss changing Chloe's grades over dinner. I'd have to knock a few others down to make the curve work, but for you, I'd do it." The restaurant went quiet. People at the tables around us stopped mid-conversation. Someone put down a fork. Mr. Whitmore's chair scraped back. He looked at me and said, "You manipulated me." I said, "No. I gave you exactly what you asked for. A date." Principal Hernandez stood up and told him he was suspended effective immediately, pending a full investigation. He looked like the floor had dropped out from under him. I picked up my bag, stood up, and walked out without looking back at him once. And I thought that was the end of it. It was not even close to the end. That night, Driving home, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost let it go. I answered on the last ring. The voice on the other end was a young woman, and she was crying. She said her name was Dana. She said she was a former student of Mr. Whitmore's, now in her second year of college, and that she had seen a post on a local parent forum where someone had described overhearing a confrontation at a restaurant involving a teacher and a principal. She had connected the details. She asked if the teacher's name was Whitmore. When I said yes, she went quiet for a moment. Then she said, "He did the same thing to me. Except I was 17, and I had no one to help me." She told me that 3 years ago, she had been his student. That he had made comments that made her uncomfortable. That when she did not respond the way he wanted, her grade dropped from an A to a C over the course of 6 weeks. That the C had cost her a merit scholarship at her first-choice university. That she had reported it to the school at the time and been told there was no evidence of misconduct. That she had moved on because she had no other choice. I asked her if she would be willing to put that in writing. She said she had been waiting 3 years for someone to ask her that question. Dana's written statement went to Principal Hernandez the following morning. It also went to the district's Title IX coordinator and the district's Human Resources office, both of which I had looked up the night before. I sent everything in a single email with a clear subject line and a read receipt. Within 48 hours, the district had opened a formal investigation. Within the week, 2 more former students had come forward with accounts that followed the same pattern: grave retaliation after rejected advances, both previously dismissed by school administration. The vice principal who had told me they would look into it after my first complaint was placed on administrative review for failure to act on a documented harassment report. I had not planned for that outcome. But I was not sorry about it. If you receive a complaint from a parent describing a teacher grabbing her wrist and threatening her, and your response is to do nothing and wait for it to go away, then you are not a bystander. You are part of the problem, and you should be treated accordingly. Here is the part that hit me hardest, though, and it did not come from my side of the story. While all of this was unfolding, Chloe had been doing something on her own that I did not know about. She had gone back through every graded assignment from Mr. Whitmore's class over the past 5 weeks and documented each one, writing the correct answer beside his marked response, citing the exact textbook page and equation for every correction. She had done it methodically, without telling me, because she said she wanted to be able to prove it herself and not just rely on what I was doing. She compiled everything into a 12-page document and emailed it directly to the National Science Foundation Scholarship Committee with a cover letter she wrote herself, explaining the situation clearly and without drama. She was 16 years old. The committee responded within 4 days, requested her original exam, her documentation, and a statement from Principal Hernandez confirming the active investigation. Chloe sent everything the same afternoon. I did not find out any of this had happened until after she had already sent it. I sat there reading the email chain she showed me, and I did not know whether to laugh or cry, so I did a little of both. The investigation concluded 3 weeks later. Mr. Whitmore was terminated. The termination letter cited abuse of grading authority, creation of a hostile academic environment, and failure to maintain appropriate professional boundaries with a student's parent. The vice principal received a formal reprimand and mandatory retraining. Dana's case was referred to the district's legal office for review of potential remediation, and the 2 additional former students were connected with the same office. And Chloe received a letter from the National Science Foundation Scholarship Committee informing her that her application had been reviewed under their academic integrity exception process, that her corrected exam score had been accepted, and that she had been selected as one of 50 recipients nationwide. She read the letter twice, set it on the kitchen table, and said, "I knew my answers were right." I did not say a word. I just let her have that moment, because she had earned every second of it, and because she had fought for it herself in a way I had not even known to ask her to. I have had people ask me since then whether I feel bad about how it ended for him. I want to answer that honestly. I do not feel bad. Not because I wanted to end someone's career, but because he made a series of deliberate choices. He looked at my daughter, a 16-year-old who had done nothing to him, and he used her future as a tool to punish me for saying no. He did it over weeks, methodically, while watching her come home confused and devastated and doubting herself. He did it knowing she had no way to fight back on her own. And when I went through the proper channels and asked for help, the person whose job it was to protect students looked at my complaint and decided it was easier to do nothing. So when people ask me if I feel bad, my answer is this: I feel like the outcome was exactly proportional to the choices that were made. He chose to weaponize a child's grades. The child documented every single one of those grades and sent the evidence directly to the people who mattered. That is not a story about revenge. That is a story about what happens when you underestimate someone who has nothing left to lose and a daughter worth fighting for. Chloe starts university in the fall. Full scholarship. Astrophysics. She has already emailed her future department advisor and mapped out her first 2 years of coursework. She is going to be extraordinary. She was always going to be extraordinary. She just needed someone to make sure the door stayed open long enough for her to walk through it. And the man who tried to close that door learned, in front of his boss and a full restaurant and eventually a district investigation, that there are consequences for mistaking a mother's patience for weakness. Some people learn that lesson quietly. He learned it at a candlelit table with 2 glasses of wine he never got to drink, surrounded by strangers who heard every word.